blood thicker than water. Not when millions are on the line. When a wealthy father passed away, he left his glamorous multi-million-dollar estate to his two eldest greedy children. To the youngest daughter, the one who had sacrificed everything to care for him, in his final years, he left a rusted-out, flat-tired junk car in the middle of the desert. They laughed in her face, but what they didn't know was that hidden beneath the rust was a secret that would not only make her a multimillionaire, but would bring their entire world crashing down around them. The air in the lawyer's conference room on Wilshire Boulevard felt heavy enough to choke on, thick with the smell of expensive leather and stale coffee. Outside the massive floor-to-ceiling windows, the Los Angeles skyline shimmered in the afternoon haze, but inside, the atmosphere was ice-cold. Elena Mitchell sat at the far end of a long, polished table, her hands clutched tightly in her lap. She wore a simple black dress, the same one she'd worn to her father Arthur's funeral 3 days before. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, a testament to the 3 grueling years she had spent as his sole caregiver, juggling her full-time job as a pediatric nurse with the heart-wrenching demands of hospice care. Across from her sat her siblings. Her brother Richard, 15 years older, fussed with the cuffs of his custom-tailored suit, his eyes glued to his phone as if the reading of his own father's will was just an annoying interruption to his day. Beside him, her sister Fiona, draped in obscenely expensive black Prada, impatiently tapped her fingers, the constant clinking of her Cartier bracelets the loudest sound in the room. Neither of them had even visited their father in the last 14 months of his life. They were always too busy. Richard with his venture capital firm in Silicon Valley, Fiona flipping luxury real estate in Orange County. At the head of the table, Jonathan Reed, the family's estate attorney, cleared his throat. His voice was like dry gravel. "Let us begin," he said, his gaze flicking to Elena for just a moment before focusing on the thick legal binder in front of him. "This is the final will and testament of Arthur Thomas Mitchell." The first few minutes were filled with standard legal jargon, but when Reed got to the distribution of assets, the air in the room crackled with tension. Their father had been a brilliant, self-made man, an eccentric engineer with a portfolio of aerospace patents that had made him a fortune. His estate was massive. To my eldest son, Richard, and my eldest daughter, Fiona, Reed read in a flat, emotionless tone, "I leave the primary residence located in Pasadena, California, appraised at $12.4 million, to be divided equally. Furthermore, the entirety of my liquid assets, including all investment portfolios and holding accounts, are to be split evenly between Richard and Fiona." Elena felt the air get knocked out of her. It wasn't about the money. She'd never expected a dime. But the house, that was her childhood home. That was where she had held her father's hand, where she had spoon-fed him and managed his pain while Richard and Fiona ignored his calls. A small, satisfied smile played on Richard's lips. Fiona leaned back in her chair, letting out a soft, triumphant sigh. "And to my youngest daughter, Elena," Reed continued, his voice rising slightly. Elena's heart pounded. She wasn't hoping for millions. Maybe just something sentimental, his favorite watch, or the deed to the little cabin in Lake Arrowhead where they used to go fishing. Anything to feel like those 3 long, painful, beautiful years had meant something to him. To Elena, Reed read, who always had the rare gift of seeing the value beneath a rusted surface, "I leave the plot of land known as Parcel 4A, out on Old Route 66 in Barstow, California, along with the corrugated metal shed on the property and the non-operational 1968 vehicle stored within." The room went completely silent. And then Fiona laughed. It was a sharp, ugly sound. "A junk car," she scoffed, her eyes wide with mocking disbelief. "He left you a broken-down car in a shed in the desert. I guess Dad finally figured out what you were worth." "Fiona, please." The lawyer mumbled, but there was no force behind it. Richard just chuckled, shaking his head. "Look, Elena, don't take it personally. Dad was a practical man. You've always been, well, you rent that little apartment. You don't have any real investments. He probably knew if he gave you cash, you'd just donate it to an animal shelter. A project car suits you, gives you something to do on weekends." Elena stared at her reflection in the polished table, her vision blurring with hot, angry tears. The betrayal wasn't financial, it was a knife to the heart. The man she had sacrificed her life for had rewarded her with a scrap of metal in the desert and given his fortune to the 2 children who had abandoned him. "Are there any questions?" Reed asked, looking at Elena with a flicker of what might have been pity. Elena slowly stood up, her knuckles white as she gripped her purse. "No," she whispered, her voice trembling but firm. "No questions." She turned and walked out, the sound of her siblings' quiet, self-satisfied laughter echoing behind her. She felt like a fool. But more than that, she felt an aching, profound emptiness. She was utterly alone. Where are you watching from tonight? Let us know in the comments. For 2 weeks, Elena tried to lose herself in her work at the hospital, taking extra night shifts in the pediatric ward to numb the sting of her father's final cruel joke. But every morning, a thick manila envelope on her kitchen counter seemed to mock her. It contained the deed to the desert property and a single rusted brass key. Finally, she couldn't take it anymore. On a blistering hot Tuesday, she threw a case of water, a crowbar, and a flashlight in the trunk of her old Toyota Camry and headed for the desert. The drive out to Barstow is a strange one. You leave the endless gridlock of Los Angeles behind for a vast, sun-bleached emptiness. The thermometer on her dash crept past 105 degrees as she turned onto the cracked, faded asphalt of Old Route 66. Parcel 4A wasn't hard to find. It was the only thing standing for a mile in any direction, a dilapidated corrugated metal shed behind the burnout foundation of an old diner. She killed the engine and the silence was absolute. "Well, Dad," she muttered to the wind, "you really outdid yourself." The shed was secured with a heavy rusted lock. It took several minutes of wrestling with the key and a hard smack from the crowbar, but it finally clicked open. With a groan of protesting metal, she slid the heavy door open. A wave of heat blasted out, thick with the smell of old oil, rat droppings, and decades of dust. In the center of the shed, under a disintegrating tarp, was a large, lumpy shape. Elena held her breath, yanked the tarp back, and a cloud of ancient dust exploded into the air. When it settled, she stared at her inheritance. It was a 1968 Ford Mustang, but it was a corpse of a car. The paint was gone, replaced by a patchwork of primer and deep orange rust. The tires had rotted away, leaving it slumped on the dirt floor. The grille was missing. The windshield was a spiderweb of cracks, and the interior had been completely gutted. No seats, no dashboard, just bare, oxidized metal. A bitter, choked laugh escaped her lips. It was worthless. Richard and Fiona were right. Tears of pure frustration streamed down her face. Why? Why would her father do this to her? As she leaned against the car, sobbing, she steadied herself by gripping the empty frame of the driver's side door. Her fingers brushed against something hard, wedged deep inside the hollow door panel. Curious, she wiped her eyes, grabbed her flashlight, and shined the beam down into the opening. Tucked inside, protected in a thick Ziploc bag, was a small, leather-bound journal. Her heart skipped a beat. She carefully pulled it out. The leather was in perfect condition. She opened it to the first page. In her father's familiar, neat handwriting was a letter dated 2 years ago, right after his diagnosis became terminal. "My dearest Elena, if you're reading this, it means your brother and sister took the bait. They only ever saw the shiny surface, the dollar signs. They never understood true value. But you always knew that what's on the outside is just a shell." Elena's breath hitched. She read on. "This piece of scrap you're looking at is the body of a 1968 Shelby GT 500KR. I sold off the parts years ago to keep the estate from going under during the 2008 crash. The Pasadena house is mortgaged to the hilt, Elena. Richard and Fiona are about to inherit a $12 million property with a $14 million lien against it. I didn't leave them a fortune, I left them my debt." Elena's eyes went wide with shock. The mansion was a trap. She looked back at the journal. "But you, my sweet girl, you are the one who stayed. You are the only one who deserves my real life's work. The real inheritance isn't the steal. Get your crowbar. Go to the trunk. The secret is in the tank." Her heart was hammering against her ribs. She grabbed the crowbar and rushed to the back of the car. The trunk was rusted shut, but with a deafening crack of metal, she pried it open. It was empty, except for the top of the gas tank. But as she shined her light on it, she saw it wasn't a normal gas tank. The filler neck was welded shut, and a heavy custom-machined steel plate was bolted to the top with 8 massive hex bolts. It wasn't a gas tank anymore. It was a vault. She sprinted to her car, grabbed her socket wrench, and scrambled into the trunk. One by one, the heavy bolts snapped free. With a grunt, she lifted the incredibly heavy steel plate away. She shined her flashlight inside. The tank was lined with fireproof foam, and nestled in the center were 3 large rectangular packages wrapped in heavy-duty plastic. She hauled the first one out. It was shockingly heavy. With her pocket knife, she sliced through the plastic. As the desert sun hit the contents, Elena gasped and fell back onto the dirt. Staring back at her were solid, gleaming ingots of metal. Stamped on each bar were the symbols PT and RH, platinum and rhodium. Her father, the aerospace engineer, hadn't just hoarded cash. He had hoarded the rarest, most valuable industrial metals on the planet. She was looking at millions of dollars in untraceable assets. But it was the third package that changed everything. Inside the plastic was a waterproof Pelican case. Her hands shook as she opened it. Resting in the foam was a sleek titanium cylinder and a second smaller leather journal. She grabbed the journal. Elena, the metals will ensure you never have to work a night shift again. But this cylinder, this is my legacy. It's a hard drive containing the master blueprints for Project Valkyrie, a miniaturized, hyper-efficient turbine engine. Lockheed Martin offered me $80 million for these patents back in 2012. I said no. I knew Richard would just sell it to the highest bidder. I've transferred the intellectual property rights into a blind trust named after your mother. You are the sole executor. Do what you will with it. It belongs to the only person in this family with a conscience. I love you, Dad. Elena clutched the journal to her chest, sobbing uncontrollably. The suffocating weight of the last 3 years, the loneliness, the sacrifice, it all lifted. Her father had seen her. He had understood. Meanwhile, 300 miles away, Richard Mitchell's world was imploding. He was swirling a glass of expensive scotch in his Palo Alto office when his private line rang. It was the lawyer, Jonathan Reed, his voice frantic. "Richard, we have a catastrophic situation. The final audit came in. The Pasadena estate." "Just pay the mortgage off with the Schwab accounts, Jonathan," Richard sighed, annoyed. "There are no Schwab accounts," Reed snapped. "They were emptied in 2009. Your father took out a $14 million loan against the house. It's only appraised at 12. You and Fiona just inherited a $2 million deficit. The bank is foreclosing tomorrow." Richard's glass slipped from his hand and shattered. "What? No. Where did the money go?" "Hidden," Reed said coldly. "And by signing those probate documents, you and Fiona legally assumed all the debt. They're already moving to freeze your personal assets." Panic seized him. He hung up and frantically called Fiona, who was already screaming. The IRS had flagged her accounts. Creditors were circling her properties like sharks. "He set us up!" she shrieked. "That sick old man set us up. We have to find the money, Richard." Richard's mind raced. The house was a trap. The cash was gone. What was left? The non-operational 1968 vehicle. "The car," Richard whispered, his blood running cold. "Fiona, it's in the junk car in Barstow." By the time their rented Range Rover skidded to a halt in the desert dust, the sun was setting. They sprinted to the shed. The lock was broken, lying in the dirt. Richard heaved the doors open, ready to tear the car apart. The shed was completely empty. All that remained was a rectangular patch of disturbed dirt and a set of fresh tow truck tracks leading back to the highway. Lying in the very center of the empty space was a single rusted hex bolt. Fiona fell to her knees. "She took it," she sobbed. "Elena took it all." 3 weeks later, they were back in the same conference room, but the power had shifted completely. Elena sat at the head of the table, poised and confident in a tailored navy blazer. Across from her, Richard and Fiona looked like ghosts, their expensive clothes wrinkled, their faces pale with exhaustion and defeat. "This is theft, Elena," Richard snarled. "Whatever you found in that car belongs to the estate. We'll sue you for every penny." Elena's new lawyer, a shark named Harrison Cole, slid a stack of documents across the table without even looking up. "You're welcome to try, Mr. Mitchell," he said smoothly. "However, your father's will, which you so eagerly fast-tracked, legally gifted the entirety of the vehicle to my client. Under California law, that includes any integrated components and their contents. The metals are hers. But what about the patents? Richard sputtered, desperate. Project Valkyrie, you can't say patents were part of a car. Cole smiled. You're correct, which is why your father legally transferred all rights to Project Valkyrie to the Catherine Mitchell Foundation 5 years ago, a foundation of which Elena is the sole executor. In fact, we finalized the sale of those patents to a private aerospace consortium yesterday. Richard's jaw dropped. Sold? For how much? That's covered by an NDA, Cole said coolly. But I assure you, it was enough to buy your venture capital firm 10 times over, had it not filed for bankruptcy this morning. The silence was deafening. They had lost. Their father had outplayed them from the grave. Elena finally stood up. She looked at her siblings not with anger, but with a quiet sense of closure. I'm paying off the mortgage on the Pasadena house, she said softly. A flicker of hope sparked in their eyes. You are? Richard stammered. Yes. Elena nodded. I bought the debt from the bank yesterday. The house belongs to me now. She paused, letting the words hang in the air before delivering the final blow. I'm having it demolished next month. The land is being repurposed to build the Arthur and Catherine Mitchell Pediatric Oncology Center. There will be a plaque in the lobby. You're welcome to visit. Without another word, Elena turned and walked out, leaving her siblings to drown in the suffocating silence of the ruin they had built for themselves. As the elevator doors closed, she pulled the single rusted brass key from her pocket. Her father was right. She had always known how to look beneath the surface, and now, thanks to him, she had the power to build something truly beautiful from the scrap. If this story touches your heart, please subscribe to support the channel. May your family be blessed with health, peace, and prosperity. I'm so curious to know where you're all watching from and what you thought about this story. Please let me know in the comments. No matter where you are in the world, I truly hope you are safe and at peace. And hey, if you have an amazing story of your own, don't hesitate to share it with all of us. This is a place for sharing, and we'd love to hear it.